I will be direct. My name is Sam, and I am about to tell you 4 spring break stories that still make my skin crawl. I was there for 3 of them, and I collected the 4th from someone I trust like a sister, so when I say these are real, I mean real. Each one started like any other break. Cheap flights, an Airbnb promising ocean views, a cooler packed with beer, and friends who laughed too loud at stupid jokes. Then each one went sideways in a way none of us expected. It was supposed to be sun and stupid decisions. Instead, it turned into questions that never fully closed. I will tell you what we saw, what we heard, what the police wrote down, and what they never solved. This is intimate, it is disturbing, and it still keeps me awake sometimes. If you have a minute for 4 short nightmares, stay with me until the end, because the last update about what happened 6 months later still gives me chills. First tale now, then the rest will follow like a slow set of dominoes that shattered whatever innocence we had left. We booked the trips for different beaches and the timelines overlapped. In the first week, I went with Marcus, Jenna, and Carlos to an always packed stretch of coastline that people called the Party Strip. In the second week, my friend Leah texted asking if I wanted to join her and Tyler for a low-key surf trip that turned out not to be so low-key. The third story came from Sophia, who was on a road trip with Ben and Priya and called me in a panic the night after she returned. The fourth was a short confessional from my cousin Aaron, who had a spring break he would not talk about for months. Names matter in these stories because people react differently to fear. Marcus drank to stay brave. Jenna tried to joke to diffuse things. Carlos kept checking his phone like an anchor to reality. Leah would call me and say things like, "I am fine until I am not." Tyler liked to drive fast to feel in control. Sophia writes lists to cope. Ben is quiet in public and loud in private. Priya texts everything she sees to a group chat. Aaron avoids beaches now. We scattered across 3 towns and 2 highways, but what connected our nights was a familiar pattern. An ordinary start, a small oddity that we shrugged off, and then a sequence that felt like it had its own logic of escalation. You will meet these people in the stories, and I will make sure you know how each of them reacted, because that matters for what came next. I want to establish something about who I am before I go deeper, because my past decisions shaped the way I walked into danger. I grew up in a house where planning was a religion and spontaneity a crime. My father taught me to check weather reports and to write down license plates. My mother taught me to be polite to strangers and to always tell someone where I am going. Despite that, I became the friend who organized last-minute trips and encouraged risk. In college, I was the one who convinced people to take the late-night ferry or to skip sleep and chase sunrise. I loved the feeling of being uselessly brave and the attention it gave me. That changed after a few nights I still replay. One winter, a close friend got into a bad situation because I downplayed an odd person on the bus. That guilt followed me into years of travel. By the time the stories I am about to tell happened, I carried 2 contradictory instincts, meticulous checklists and a perverse lure toward chaos. That tension explains a lot of the choices I made the night Marcus did not come back and the night a stranger honked twice at our parked car and then approached. You can hear it in how I narrate. I am not trying to sound like someone heroic. I am trying to be honest about the ways I failed and the ways we survived. My backstory is important because it anchors how much blame I accept and how much I still wonder if I could have done more. The first incident began small and stupid. We arrived at the Airbnb 2 in the morning, sand in our shoes and sunscreen crusted on a towel. The unit smelled of lemon cleaner and something else metallic that I couldn't place, like iron mixed with old batteries. The host left a handwritten note telling us to be quiet after midnight because of the neighbors. We laughed about that and iced beers to celebrate the 2nd year of our supposed post-college reunion. Marcus stepped out to smoke and never closed the door behind him. 5 minutes turned into 20, and Jenna nudged Carlos saying he probably went for the street tacos. I remember the sound of the ocean muffled by the walls and the distant thump of a bass from a bar 2 blocks away. Then Carlos found Marcus' phone on the kitchen counter, face down, with the screen cracked like a broken mirror. That was the first sign.
We called his name into the dark, and the landlord came at 3 a.m. with 2 flashlights and a sleepy, complicated voice that said maybe he wandered off drunk. We split up to search the block, walking past sand-cleaned lawns and cars with sunburnt dashboards. We found nothing but a small ribbon of red cloth tied to a palm tree like a flag, and the trace smell of cheap cologne in the night air. The ribbon had a frayed edge. Jenna said it looked like someone had been in a hurry. We did not call the police then because Marcus had a history of disappearing for hours and
returning with a story. Maybe that was a mistake. The second story felt different because it involved a car, a long stretch of coastal road, and the kind of dread that builds slowly. Leah and Tyler had rented a beat-up SUV, and we were driving to a remote cove, the kind of place with a single narrow access road and more gulls than people. The GPS dwindled into unpaved lines, and the ocean turned into a flat black horizon. The car stank of sunscreen and damp bathing suits. We stopped at a pullout to take photos and noticed an old truck parked a little behind us with its lights off. Its engine was silent and the driver's seat empty. When we came back, the truck was closer. Tyler honked once to say hey, and the truck did not move. Then the driver leaned out and yelled something we could not make out over the wind. He had a full beard and sunglasses at night and a voice that sounded thin and practiced. He told us to move our car because it was blocking his access. We told him there was plenty of room. He kept insisting until Tyler said in a voice I still hear, "I am not moving my car for you," and the man slammed the side of the truck with his hand as if to say, "Prove it." Later, Tyler swore he saw a knife briefly flashing in the moonlight. We reported it to the ranger station at sunrise, and they took a statement. They noted a man matching that description had been seen asking people to move in other lots, and that he was known to be aggressive. They said they would send a patrol, but there was no immediate danger on paper. That is the kind of line that sits in your throat. The third incident is the one Sophia told me while she sat on my couch holding a mug because her hands were still shaking even a day later. She had been on a road trip with Ben and Priya driving north along a coastal highway when they stopped at a roadside bar. Inside the bar, the music smelled like spilled beer and cigarettes. There was a crackle of conversation and a game on the TV no one watched. They met a guy who bought them shots and swapped stories about hometowns. He seemed harmless at first and overly friendly in a way that made Priya roll her eyes. Later, outside the bar, the guy offered to show them an old lighthouse he said he used to sneak into and take photos. They agreed on the whim that defines risky nights and followed him down a narrow trail that smelled like seaweed and wet stone. At the lighthouse, something felt off. The air inside was cold and tasted faintly of mold. They heard a sound like a drawer sliding open in a room with no drawers, and Ben joked to break the mood. Attention, and the guy laughed too loudly. On the way back, Sophia realized she had left her bag and turned to get it. That is the moment that pulled the thread. The path was empty when she looked up, and the guy had vanished. The trail behind them seemed rearranged, like someone had walked through the beach and folded the world. Their phones had no signal. They argued and then ran. That argument became a kind of memory that keeps replaying for them because none of their stories lined up perfectly. It was one of those small, real scares that leaves a bigger permanent scab. The fourth tale came from Aaron, who for months would only say in a clipped voice, "I do not want to talk about that night," and then change the subject. Eventually, at a cookout after a few beers, he lowered his voice and described a driver who followed him and his friends for hours down a highway after a late night at a bar. The driver would slow down if they did and speed up when they sped up, and at one point flashed headlights in a pattern that felt almost like a message. Aaron said the truck had a dented bumper and stickers across the back window and kept approaching their parked car at rest stops even when they moved to well-lit areas. Aaron will tell you he felt watched in a way that had nothing to do with someone looking at him and everything to do with someone who had time to think about how to scare. He and his friends eventually confronted the driver at a gas station, and what happened after is something Aaron replayed often enough to bruise his memory.
The driver apologized awkwardly and left, but the apology carried a weight of preparation. That is what made Aaron not sleep on nights near a highway for months. After the initial incidents, each story escalated, and I want to show you how those escalations look because they follow a pattern of misreads and small choices that become big consequences. In the Marcus story, we decided to split into pairs and sweep the neighborhoods. Carlos and I went towards the boardwalk, while Jenna and Marcus phone texted the last known places. The night air smelled like a mix of fryer oil and salt, and the boardwalk lights blurred into long, tired halos. We asked people if they had seen him. A bartender named Rosa, who had been closing the taco stand, said she remembered a tall guy in a red hoodie leaving with a backpack, but she thought that was normal because so many kids roam that area. The words red hoodie stuck. We called every hospital and the police told us to fill a missing person report. The officer who took our statement was Sergeant Flores, and she was kind but matter-of-fact and asked us questions like, what time, when did you last see him, what was he wearing? Her badge had a small scuff, and her pen scratched across forms in a way that felt final. At 4 a.m. we found a pair of sandals on a dune, pressed into the sand as if someone left them in a hurry. That small discovery made our stomachs drop. Jenna shouted his name so loud the gulls scattered. The feeling was not cinematic. It was like a patient tightness in your chest that does not let you breathe easily. That is how escalation begins, not with fireworks, but with a series of small, undeniable facts that point to one bad conclusion. In the Leah and Tyler tale, the escalation was physical in a way that left bruises. Tyler confronted the man coming back from the cove and said, "Do not follow us." The man laughed and started the truck and backed up slowly. Tyler moved to block him because at that moment he felt he had to be big and decisive. The man got out with a beer bottle and walked up to the driver's side window and tapped it like he was claiming the space as his. Leah remembered hearing their voices echoing off the dunes and her palms sweating in the dim light. I can still hear the dialogue exact because Tyler said, "I am calling the ranger," and the man said, "Go ahead," and the reply carried an edge that made Tyler step back. We called the ranger, and the voice on the radio said they could send someone, but it would be 20 minutes because they were covering another area. ATC-style communications and the language of delay feel absurdly bureaucratic when you are standing in danger. The man drove off at a speed that felt deliberate and left a dust path like a signature. At sunrise, his truck was gone. Rangers Pierre and Melina took statements and said they would watch the area, but their tone suggested nothing criminal had happened yet, and they might not have jurisdiction if the man moved across county lines. ATC-style communications and the language of delay feel absurdly bureaucratic when you are standing in danger. The man drove off at a speed that felt deliberate and left a dust path like a signature. At sunrise, his truck was gone. Rangers Pierre and Melina took statements and said they would watch the area, but their tone suggested nothing criminal had happened yet, and they might not have jurisdiction if the man moved across county lines. Sophia, Ben, and Priya's escalation was less physical and more a collapse of certainty. When the stranger at the lighthouse disappeared, they argued about staying put or running. Priya wanted to call the police, but there was no bar signal. Ben tried to make jokes, and Sophia listened for obvious sounds: the ocean, wind, birds, footsteps. The air tasted like iron when they found a smear of what looked like blood on a rock step near the lighthouse door. That changed the stakes. The three of them walked in a line, holding hands like a chain of people afraid of falling. Back at the bar, the owner named Luis pretended not to notice when they told him the stranger had gone. He said he had seen a lot of kids that night, and he would be surprised if anything was wrong. Priya started to cry and film a story because telling the story out loud made it feel like evidence. That is how escalation in memory works. Small things, like a smear of blood or a bartender who shrugs, become the bones of a narrative you cannot unsee. Aaron and his friends tried to create one of those rational escalation strategies. They drove to the nearest police station and filed a report about the truck following them. Officer Grant, a tall man with an even voice, asked them to stay while he checked local cameras. The patrol took a long time, and the cameras at that time of night did not cover the stretch of road where the truck had tailed them. The officer mentioned they would send an alert to other stations and recommended different rest stops. The truck never reappeared in a way that could be proven, but he felt the proximity of something that had watched across hours and miles. That sense of being measured made him forget to sleep. I will pause here to ask you to do something for me. Pause a second and think about the nights you brushed off a weird feeling when traveling, whether it was ignoring a gut instinct about a stranger or skipping a safety check. I want you to write in the comments if you have ever had a similar moment. Start your comment with "I was there" or "I felt that," so I can find them easily. Share as much as you feel safe sharing because these stories help each other make sense. I will read and highlight a few in the next video, and I promise to take seriously tips that readers say help them in real ways. Now back to the stories. The moments of terror in each night crystallize into images that still haunt me, and I will recount each one in the clearest terms I can. The first major terror is the soundless cry we heard near the dunes when we found a footprint pattern that did not match any shoes and then saw a piece of torn fabric snagged in the grass. It was one of those small cinematic things that belongs in movies until it happens to you. The night was suddenly a place that had time to breed possibilities, and we felt like prey. The second terror was when the man at the cove pulled a bottle and the light hit it in a way that made it look more weapon than beverage. He stepped closer, and his shadow swallowed Tyler. For a second, we all froze, and the world narrowed to a ring of breath. The third terror came at the lighthouse when Sophia turned and realized the stranger had gone, but her bag was gone too, and the path behind them looked trampled as if someone had walked backwards. The fourth terror was the feeling of being followed down the motorway, the way a tail smells the air and stays attached until you decide to pull over. Each of these moments lasted long enough to rearrange a complete life.
I will expand two of those moments to give you the texture of panic, because they are important, and because every choice after them hinged on seconds in which we had to decide. The first expanded moment was the dune discovery in Marcus' case. We were squinting into the dark, and a sliver of moon cut the sand into ridges. The smell of fry oil forgot the beach and clung to our clothes. Carlos crouched and pointed with one finger and said, "Look." The print was a barefoot print, but deep like someone had jogged. The torn cloth was inside the print like a flag. Jenna whispered his name, and the sound was swallowed by ocean noise. I remember pressing my palm to the sand and feeling it cold like a sheet on a hospital bed. I asked aloud, what if he fell? What if he tried to find a ride? And the thought of him alone somewhere in the city felt unbearable. We called again, and finally, this time, someone on the line sounded awake and asked for details peel by peel. That felt like progress and like a bandage. The second expanded moment was the truck confrontation at the cove. The man swaggered up and tapped a window, and his breath smelled of salt and whiskey. Tyler stepped out and said, "You need to leave, now." The man lifted one shoulder like he had been rehearsing this, which made her anger rise like steam. He said, "Why should I?" And Tyler said, "Because this is our spot." And the man laughed. That laugh was not humor. It was a measuring sound. And then he raised his hand too fast, and Tyler recoiled. In those seconds, I saw a mutual recognition of risk, and the seeing of it made time freeze in a way that later played on repeat. Climax. Each story hit a peak that felt like a throat being cut open. In Marcus' case, the climax was not cinematic in the sense of a single dramatic reveal. It was the coordinated failure of several systems. The police arrived, and a canine unit walked the boardwalk in the daylight and found nothing but the ribbon and the sandals and some cigarette butts. Sergeant Flores called it puzzling but treatable as a missing persons case. The district attorney later would say, without clear evidence, there is a limit to what they can do. That sentence lodged itself in my chest.
We sifted through cameras from the boardwalk and found a clip of a shadowy figure moving in the background at 3:25. The clip was grainy and the face impossible to make out. It was enough for us to know someone else was there and not enough for a charge. That ambiguity is its own terror. In the Leah and Tyler story, the climax came when the man returned later that night and parked across the access road. He walked up to the SUV and tapped the window again, then leaned down close and whispered in a voice that made Leah gag. He said, "You too do not belong here," in a voice that implied he had plans. Tyler floored the gas, and they left a chalky smell of burnt rubber and fear. The moment of escape felt like a cliff. It is a small miracle to get away and a monstrous thought to imagine being trapped. Sophia, Ben, and Priya's climax was when they returned to the bar and the man was there as if he had never left. Priya confronted him and he shrugged off the accusation as a joke. But when the three of them put their phones together to compare photos, they realized the man had taken a selfie in the lighthouse window and his thumb blocked part of the image in a way that showed intention. Aaron's climax was a late-night strategy at a gas station where his friends decided to jaywalk in front of the truck to force the driver to stop and face them. The driver did stop and stepped out and said in a quiet voice, "I did not follow you," and his smile did not match the words. They left and later found a sticker on their car that read, "We are watching," in handwriting that matched the stickers on the truck. Immediate resolution in each case involved police and a set of procedural steps I'll describe because procedures matter and because I want to give you concrete detail, not just emotion. When we called the police for Marcus, they advised filing a missing person report, which we did at the Central Precinct with Sergeant Flores. She explained they would log the time, fingerprint for call, and begin a database search. She told us to gather any receipts, screenshots, or rideshare logs because those are the things that can tie a person to a place. The canine unit was called and a search grid established covering 2 blocks inland and the dunes. The officers took statements from neighbors and the Airbnb host and later called us back to say they checked hospitals within a 100-mile radius. This description is procedural, yet it comforts me to repeat because it shows there was movement. For Leah and Tyler, the ranger station opened an incident report and Ranger Pierre and Ranger Molina photographed tire tracks and took a written account. They advised us to avoid that access point for a while and to report any sighting of the truck. Their report included details like truck make, color, and license plate partials. The ranger's camera logs would later show a vehicle matching the description circling the lot at odd hours. For Sophia's group, the bar owner filled a statement, and Luis said he would check his cameras. The police took the lighthouse steps as evidence and had an evidence technician catalog the smear with gloves and swabs to send to the lab. That sample return was slow and months later. The lab reported inconclusive results. The procedures are not dramatic, but they are the way the world tries to make order and sometimes fails. When Aaron confronted the driver, the station logged a harassment complaint, and Officer Grant said they would inform Highway Patrol. They also suggested changing rest stops and not stopping alone. Those mundane pieces of advice haunt me because in each case the official response was the best available but still imperfect. There are several technical details about investigations and medical procedures that came into play, and I will be specific because it matters if you are listening for real precautions. When the canine unit was deployed, they do not simply run dogs everywhere. Handlers map probable drift patterns from the last known location and divide search areas into grids. The dogs are given scent articles like a worn shoe or a hat because scents degrade quickly in wind or water. That is why items like shoes or phones are critical. Police technicians also photographed scenes with scale markers placed next to footprints and took soil samples from disturbed areas. Evidence chain of custody forms were signed and time-stamped to keep traceability. In the bar case, any bodily fluids are swabbed using sterile collection kits and placed in biohazard bags, then shipped to a forensic lab with a log. The labs run DNA comparisons, and if samples are degraded, they use mitochondrial DNA, which is less conclusive but can help narrow searches. These are technical steps and they take time, which often feels like failure when you are waiting. I say this so you know that the world does not ignore these things but has limits. After the immediate drama, there were consequences that shaped relationships and choices, and I want to be clear about the human fallout because that is the part that lingers. In Marcus' case, our group fractured. There was an argument about who should have stayed sober, who should have checked on him, and accusations that seemed small and absurd in other contexts suddenly felt like edged knives. Marcus's mother Nadia flew in and hugged Jenna and cried into her shoulder and asked how could you let him go. The police called her with updates and then with the news that no new leads had surfaced. Friends like Rosa, the bartender, and a neighbor named Tom offered to help, led searches, and to post flyers. A local journalist named Priya actually wrote a short piece, and the comments section filled with both support and ugly speculation. Some people blamed Marcus for walking off alone, others blamed us for not doing more. We internalized both. I felt a heavy load of guilt and shame because I have always been the one to push plans forward and I could not stop replaying decisions. That is part of why I tell these stories now. In the Leah and Tyler case, the couple argued more than they had in years about trust and control. Leah started carrying pepper spray in her pocket, and Tyler stopped driving at night for a while. They refused to go to that cove again and instead donated to a local ranger fund. Sophia, Ben, and Priya grew closer because they clung to each other as proof they had not been alone in fear. Aaron became a different person at rest stops, always scanning, always alert. He still calls me at odd hours to say he is on the road. Those are the human costs, and they ripple. My own backstory factors here again because after these stories I confronted my pattern of daring and avoidance and wrote down new rules. I set boundaries about alcohol when we were in unfamiliar places. I insisted on check-in times and on taking photographs of license plates. I stopped minimizing guests with a strange energy and started asking more questions. The smallest changes were the hardest, like saying, I cannot come out tonight because my intuition says no. People around me reacted in different ways. Marcus' siblings were angry at us friends. Jenna moved away for a while and changed her job. Carlos enrolled in a wilderness first aid class. Leah and Tyler joined local volunteer patrols. Sophia started a small blog cataloging odd nights to make sense of the sequence. Ben sought therapy and Priya volunteered at community safety groups. Officer Flores checked on us sometimes and told me the best thing to do is to make reports, even if you think they will not stick, because pattern recognition matters in time. Naming these 5 to 8 people is not to dramatize, but to show the network that forms after danger touches you, and to make clear these are real individuals impacted by real fear. There are specific moments of tension I promise to expand, and here I give you 2 more because they underline how texture becomes terror. One such passage happened when Marcus' phone finally pinged in an area with low signal. The location was a small storage lot behind a shuttered shop. We drove in and found a folding chair, a scatter of shells, and the smell of oil like an old machine. I remembered the metallic glint of a lighter and the soft muted beep of the phone like a heartbeat. Jenna screamed when she saw a smear of something on a crate. Carlos tried to be rational and said maybe it is tomato sauce, and we all wished to be that naive. The truth in the moment was that nuance did not matter. The signal mattered. The other passage took place at a rest stop where Aaron and his friends decided to call the driver out of his truck. They walked to the pump where he stood and said, "Why are you following us?" And the man smiled like he had planned it. He said it was a coincidence and then reached into his pocket. Time slowed and you could see every breath and the little flap of skin at the corner of his eye. They left because a stranger called out for help that drew attention and the truck drove away. The immediate relief did not erase the long-term fear. Epilogue, 1 month later. 1 month after the busiest week of the stories, things were messy and small changes happened. Marcus remained missing, and our group held a candle vigil at the beach with about 30 people, including Nadia, the mother, and Rosa, the bartender, and Tom. The police had new CCTV footage that showed a shadowy figure near a boardwalk payphone, but nothing identifiable. Sergeant Flores called to say they were treating the case with priority and had increased patrols, but that lead generation is slow and often returns nothing at first. Leah and Tyler had a campsite in a different town, and they sent a photo of their feet in the sand with pepper spray and a note saying, "We are okay." Sophia posted a photo of the lighthouse with the caption, "We keep going because we have to." And Ben and Priya wrote long posts about the fragility of trust. Aaron had replaced the truck with a white rental and installed a dash cam and sent a voice note that said, "I sleep with the light on." 1 month later, we were all nursing wounds of varying sizes and learning to function with new rituals. Epilogue 3 months later. 3 months later, the pattern had started to show small cracks. The lab results from the lighthouse smear returned inconclusive DNA, but also revealed a partial match to a profile in a different state, which led to follow-ups and one interview. Officer Grant informed us that the Highway Patrol had flagged a truck with similar stickers, but lacked sufficient evidence to hold him. A journalist who followed Aaron's story ran a piece that pushed the Highway Patrol to re-examine camera footage at a series of stops in neighboring towns. Leah started a local online group to share dangerous parking areas, and Rangers Pierre and Melina used public posts to warn about the aggressive man at the cove. Marcus' case remained open and had reached a regional task force. We received an anonymous message claiming a sighting, and the police checked it out and reported back it was not credible. The tide of attention felt both helpful and cruel. People started to post tips about safety, carrying chargers, or sharing live locations before heading into unknown places, and that was a small victory. Epilogue 6 months later. 6 months from the first night, things had shifted in ways both hopeful and unresolved. The local district attorney closed several leads for lack of evidence, but the task force had expanded the missing person bulletin and added Marcus to a national database. Sergeant Flores told Nadia that a private investigator had picked up a thread in a neighboring county and asked our group to be available for interviews. Leah and Tyler got married quietly with a small ceremony on a different beach and written vows that thanked friends for watching out for each other. Sophia turned her blog into a resource section and included a downloadable checklist for traveling in remote spots. Aaron testified at a county safety hearing about rest stop lighting, and the hearing led to an allocation for improved cameras at 3 rest stops. Tyler joined a volunteer beach patrol, and Carlos finished the wilderness first aid course. None of these outcomes brought closure to everyone, but they created systems that could help other people. 6 months later, we were altered. We had taken fear and tried to reshape it into cautious action. Before I close, I want to give concrete advice based on what we learned, because these stories are not meant to be morbid trophies. If you travel with friends, set a check-in time and stick to it. Photograph license plates and keep those photos in a note titled "Emergency." Carry a basic first aid kit and know where to find the nearest ranger or police station on your map. Share your live location with at least one trusted person and avoid isolated spots if someone else makes you uneasy. If a person approaches your parked car, keep doors locked and drive to a well-lit area. If you are in a remote place and feel odd, trust it and call the local ranger or police even if the answer is delayed, because patterns matter to investigations. Keep a list of contacts and emergency numbers in your phone and on paper somewhere in your bag. These are small acts, but they create a margin of safety. I know this was heavy, and I appreciate you making it to the end. To recap briefly, 4 nights of spring break that started ordinary turned into a set of warnings that changed the way we travel. We filed reports, we rewrote routines, and some people are still looking for answers. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel to hear updates, because I will continue to track what happened, especially in Marcus's case, and will bring you any new developments that come in. Also, tell your story below, start with "I was there" or "I felt that" so I can find them quickly. I will read them and bring a few into the next episode. Thank you for listening and for holding space for these stories. Remember, trust your instinct, because sometimes it is the only navigation tool you have. And one last thing I have learned the hard way: do not assume help will come instantly, so make small preparations now that will help later.